You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It is season 3. It's episode number 35. The Cubs injuries keep on coming. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow on the socials, Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram. We're also on Facebook. You can also email Crawly and I, flythew670@gmail.com. All right, Crawly, we're going to be recapping the Cubs trip out east to Boston. Their next trip is going to be to New York to take on the Mets. But let's rewind with everybody a little bit. Let's get into game number 1. That was Friday evening, and Shota Imanaga was getting his first look at Fenway Park.
Yeah, I'm gonna recap the third game of the series after the game plays tonight. But as of right now, Dustin, it's been a weird series. It's a split so far. The first game we thought was going to be a great pitching duel between Shota Imanaga and Cutter Crawford, who were both in the top 3 in ERA in baseball. And in fact, Cutter Crawford's ERA was better than Shota's. But Shota kept his part of the deal. He went 6.1 innings. He gave up 1 run on 5 hits with 1 walk and 7 Ks. Dustin, Imanaga retired the first 10 batters he faced before giving up a solo home run to Tyler O'Neill. So
yep. He looked really good, man. He just checks all the boxes right now, Crawly.
Well, how good has Shota been through 5 starts? His .98 is the lowest ERA by a Cubs pitcher through 5 career MLB starts since 1912, when the ERA became an official start. Imanaga is the first starter since David Ferris in 1945 to go 4-0 or better with an ERA below 1 in his first 5 career games. And since earned runs became official in 1913, the only player to have a 4-0 team record, 20-plus Ks, and a sub-1 ERA through their 4 career games are Shota and Boo Ferris in 1945. So,
wow. I don't know Boo. Maybe next time we have Bruce on, we'll ask him about Boo Ferris.
Yeah, I mean, that just tells you this is like a historical start for Shota. I don't think any Cub fans, we were excited. This is beyond anyone's wildest imagination.
Yeah, nobody could have saw this coming. Nobody could have expected it. And he's just such a good guy, loves baseball, loves the history of it. So I'm sure he was thrilled he was able to do what he did out at Fenway Park on Friday night.
Now, Dustin, not only was Shota dealing, but Keegan Thompson pitched 2.2 scoreless innings. He gave up 2 hits, 1 walk, and 2 Ks. Since being called up on April 12th, Keegan's appeared 5 times. He's thrown 9.2 innings and given up 3 hits, 12 Ks, 3 walks with a 0.00 ERA. Another one, Dustin, where if you would have told me before the season that Keegan Thompson was going to play a big role in the first month, I would have looked at you cockeyed.
Right. And he saved the bullpen, right? You know, you got 16, they're on the 16 game stretch, and here he is coming out of the pen and finishing things off on Friday night. So that was awfully big as well. And no, nobody would have expected this out of him so far, what he's done. I expected him to be up, but I didn't expect him to be up this soon.
And this pitching this well.
Well, of course, right. That's without saying, right, of course.
And so the Cubs only had to use 2 pitchers. So that got me excited.
Huge.
Cutter Crawford had the second lowest ERA coming into the game. He had made 5 starts, Dustin, and never gave up more than 1 run in any of those starts. Well, the Cubs didn't seem to get that memo. In the second inning, Michael Busch hit a leadoff double. Dansby singled to put runners at the corner. And then Matt Mervis, who was 0 for 6 with 3 strikeouts since being called up to the big club, singled to make it 1-0. How good did that have to feel for Merv?
Yeah, he had to feel great. Happy for him. The 3 strikeouts obviously had to be bugging him, to be able to do that again at Fenway for these young guys has to be super special.
Yeah, some bad luck on the next batters. Miguel Amaya hit a rocket right to first baseman Bobby Dalbach, who doubled off Murphys. But with 2 outs, PCA hit a single, and the Cubs were up 2-0. And PCA wasn't done in the 4th inning with runners at the corners and 1 out. PCA hit a bunt. He nearly beat it out, but Dansby Swanson alertly broke towards home and scored to make it 3-0. Really heads up base running by Dansby. On
great base running by Dansby. Absolutely. And love the call from Craig Counsell there, right? I mean, they obviously put that on. That wasn't something the PCA just dialed up when he went up to bat. So something you have to give the tip of the cap to Craig Counsell on that as well.
And it's the speed of PCA that makes it difficult too, because you got to make a play. What are you going to hold it? Are you going to throw it to first? And so it worked out perfectly. In the 5th, Mike Talkman and Ian Happ put runners at the corners. Michael Busch with the sac fly to make it 4-1. Cutter Crawford pitched a scoreless 6, but his day was done. And so you're talking about 6 innings pitched. He gave up 4 runs, 3 earned on 10 hits with no walks and 4 Ks. Joely Rodriguez came into the game in the 7th. He walked the first batter he faced. Mike Talkman advanced to second on a wild pitch and then stole third. Christopher Morel singled to put the Cubs up 5-1. I think he's coming out of it, Dustin. And then Michael Busch singled on a ball that landed in front of the catcher to put runners at first and second. And then Counsell again dialed it up. He had Patrick Wisdom pinch hit for Mervis, put a 2-run double to put the Cubs up 7-1, and that would be the final. Dustin, the Cubs offense scored 7 runs on 14 hits. Christopher Morel was 2 for 5. Busch, who struggled at the home series with Houston, was 4 for 4, and PCA was 2 for 3 with 2 RBIs.
Well, got to feel great for PCA, and it's good to see Christopher Morel coming around. And, now everybody's having fun with Michael Busch last name. Did you next time you go to the Jewels, Crawly, you're going to get yourself a 12-pack of Busch just in honor of Michael Busch?
Maybe a 30-pack.
Maybe a 30-pack. Well, they sell Busch does sell a 30-pack, so you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, Busch Latte. I might be down with that. Now, as fun as game 1 was, Dustin, game 2 was just miserable.
Yeah, the Patriots got involved. It was the Patriots versus the Bears instead of the Red Sox versus the Cubs.
Ben Brown versus Josh Winkowski. And now, Dustin, I was nervous about game 1. I saw Cutter's record and everything he's done. I mean, again, he's second best ERA in baseball. And then I look at Josh Winkowski. I'm saying, okay, he's out of the bullpen. He's only starting because of injuries, right? And Ben Brown had been looking so good. And not only that, Ben Brown grew up a big fan of the Red Sox. So, I mean, I'm sure he was excited and ready to get going, but that's not what happened. Ben had his first outing since his debut in Texas. His worst outing since his debut. His worst outing since the debut in Texas. In the first, he gave up a leadoff double to Jared Duran off the wall. And one batter later, Tyler O'Neill, former Cardinal prospect, homered to left and put the Cubs up 2-0.
Well, I'm glad this Tyler O'Neill is out of the division because this kid basically, no matter where you pitch the ball, I mean, he golfed that one. I mean, you can blame Ben Brown all you want, but he golfed that one out.
Yep. In the second, Brown gave up 2 singles, but got out of it. Then in the fourth, he gave up back-to-back singles to lead off the inning. Bobby Dahlbach bunted the runners over, and Ceddanne Rafael hit a sac fly to give Boston a 3-0. That was it for Brown as he went 3.2 innings. He gave up 3 runs on 7 hits with 4 Ks. Luke Little came in and got the final out. But Brown was, really hit hard the entire time he was in the game. They were putting dents in that green monster.
Right. It's 7 hits. It wasn't awful. I mean, I wonder if the Cubs had gotten out to a better start. They've been good at scoring early and often in games, right? And so working from a deficit the whole time. It's only 3.2 innings. They bring in Luke Little. I mean, the offense, obviously, we already told you what the final score was in game number 2. The offense did absolutely nothing. So no matter how good or bad he would have been, it wasn't going to make a difference.
Yeah, it was just awful. And then when Luke comes in, he gets the final out. And again, the only thing about Ben Brown that made you concerned was how hard they were hitting the ball. And so, what you're trying to look for is some weak contact. When guys are hitting the ball 100, 101 miles per hour exit velocity, that was the concern going through the third time in the order.
Right. Listen, I'm not saying it wasn't time to get him out. I'm just saying, I wonder what the mentality would have been, the approach would have been had the Cubs had a couple of runs on the board.
And they had opportunities that we'll talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But Luke Little came back out in the 5th, and that's when the wheels fell completely apart. Tyler O'Neill, like you said, on fire, hits a double. Luke threw a wild pitch, gave up a single to make it 4-0. He then hits Connor Wong with a pitch, gave up a ground out to Masataka Yoshida that advanced the runners to second and third. Then he hits Rob Rensford with a pitch.
I mean, all over the place. I mean, what is up with the control?
Yeah, and the bases loaded now with 1 out. Bobby Dahlbach singled on a ball. And Dustin, to me, this was the key play of the game. And we talked about this in the last podcast, right?
Yep, so I thought about it immediately when it happened.
Right. You're down 4-0. It's still early in the game. It's in the 5th inning. And you sit there and there's a ball that Rob Rensford hits, or that Bobby Dahlbach hits a single, and Luke puts his glove down. And had he not touched it, it would have been right at Dansby. That would have been a double play. The inning would have been over with the Cubs trailing 4-0. Instead, the run scores. There's still only 1 out, and Luke's day is done.
Yeah, I mean, It's just I don't know if you have to start coaching that. I don't know how you know when to field your position or when to not field your position, but you're exactly right. I mean, had that been different, it's a double play without a doubt.
Right, and you're only down 4-0. Instead, Colton Brewer comes in. He's greeted by Ceddanne Rafaela, who doubled and cleared the bases, which were loaded. And just like that, the Cubs were down 8-0. Jared Duran had an RBI ground out off Colton Brewer to make it 9-0 before the inning ended. A 6-run inning for the Red Sox. Brewer then gave up a 2-run homer in the 7th that made it 11-0.
At that point, it should have been the mercy rule, right? Everybody go home. Here's a hot dog on the way out. Thanks for coming. Nothing else to see here. Move it along. We'll be back tomorrow night. And who is this? Who is this Brewer guy? Who is Colton Brewer, Crawly?
Yeah, he was a non-roster invitee. He looked pretty good in the springtime, and then in Iowa, he did a good job. He was working as the closer. But again, you're going to, with Little, with Brewer, with some of these guys, they're going to take their lumps, and that's just how it is.
I'm guessing we've seen the last of him.
Not with the injuries. I don't know. I mean, then you can call up, I guess, Daniel Palencia, but he's a guy who had trouble too.
Well, get Daniel Palencia. I'd much rather have Daniel Palencia up here than this Brewer guy. I mean, gosh, he looked awful.
He looked awful yesterday, and so it's one game.
Hey, I'm based on yesterday, Crawly. That's what we're dealing with right now, right? Yesterday was Saturday. Today's Sunday. I'm dealing with Saturday. He was awful.
Well, what was even worse was Matt Mervis. Council had 2 position players in the 8th inning, and this was when it got ugly. He got 2 batters out, but he gave up 6 runs on 7 hits. Then came in Patrick Wisdom to finish up. He gave up a run-scoring single that was charged to Mervis, but was able to get out of the inning.
I mean, I hate when that stuff happens. I mean, just drives me nuts. Just awful. I couldn't even watch it. I mean, I turned it off. Couldn't take it anymore. I was like, oh.
The only thing I would tell you is Mervis and Wisdom can throw some heat. They're throwing in the mid to close to upper 80s, which kind of puts them in the Kyle Hendricks category.
Mm-hmm. Well, as bad as the pitching was, probably, I mean, the offense was no better yesterday.
No, they were shut out for the first time this season. They only had 5 hits. They had 2 runners on in the first, stranded them. 2 runners on in the second when Gomes singled and PCA doubled. 2 runners on the fourth on a Mervis walk and a Gomes single. Didn't score on the, so that's what you're talking about in the beginning, is that maybe if Brown gets some of that run support, you're talking about in 3 of the 4th inning, you had 2 runners on and didn't score.
Right. What's the mindset then? What's the approach then? Things could have been very, very different.
Now the Cubs didn't have another base runner from the 5th through the 8th, and the 9th, Michael Busch singled and Canario drew a walk. So again, you had 2 runners on, but it didn't matter. They left those stranded. The offense went 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position. And then again, after the 5th, it really didn't matter. And then to make matters worse, Dustin, there was a scary collision between Christopher Morel and Alexander Canario on a ball that I don't know what Morel was doing that deep in the outfield. That was like a 100-yard dash.
Yeah, it just shows where he's at the position. Again, you can't blame the guy. You got to love the fact that the guy's always trying. He's always hustling. Again, it's him and Canario, another rookie type player. So there was definitely some communication issues. Right.
I'm guessing Canario didn't expect at all that Morel would be that deep out. I mean, he was literally in short left. I mean, it wasn't even close. And so we don't know. I mean, Morel says, "Hey, I'm feeling okay," but that
looks like they came out of it okay. I mean, we'll see if he's out of the lineup today. Potentially, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, that game's not until later tonight, as we're recording this on Sunday morning. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, but we thought Cody Bellinger was going to be okay the next day, and that turned out to be a disaster.
Yeah, let's hope. Yeah, okay. I'm going to knock on wood there, Crawly. Let's hope that is not the same. Don't I think that bad juju on a Sunday morning.
I think either way, you don't play him today. I just let the kid rest.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. But don't let that send off buzzers and oh my gosh, the season's over or anything like that. If he's not
the season's not over, thanks to the Cubs' depth at least. That's being tested very much early this season. But I'm definitely going to be watching that closely.
And it was good. They got some guys off their feet, right? No reason to have Ian Happ and Swanson out there, get them off their feet during the blowout. So again, another smart managerial decision by the skipper, Craig Counsell.
Cub fans, we are not flying the W tonight. We are flying the L. Unfortunately, Sunday night baseball, that was a crazy one. And, after getting crushed 17-0 the day before, the Cubs had a big task in front of them if they wanted to win the rubber match. Tanner Houck has been the ace of the Red Sox, and Hayden Wesniewski was going to get the start. With one out in the first, Rafael Devers reached on an error by Nico Horner. So I don't know about you guys. I haven't been impressed with the defense so far this season. I think there's a lot that still needs to be cleaned up. Tyler O'Neill would walk, and then Wilbur Abreu would fly out. But with 2 outs, Connor Wong singled, and the Cubs were down 1-0. That same combination scored in the third. Devers singled to lead off the inning. O'Neill grounded out to advance Devers to second. And then once again with 2 outs, Connor Wong singled on a ball that it looked like Morel was going to have, and it hit the third base bag. So that just kind of tells you what kind of luck the Cubs had this whole series. But that put up Boston up 2-0. I thought Hayden did pretty good. He went 4 innings. He gave up 2 runs. Only one of them earned on 5 hits, 1 walk, and 3 Ks. But if you look at both of those runs, one of them shouldn't score because of the error on Nico, and the other was a fluke play that Morel would have probably made if it didn't hit the third base bag. So Richard Lovelady, a.k.a. Dick Lovelady, he gets called up. He pitches a scoreless inning, looks good. Yency Almonte came into the game in the 6th and walked the first batter he faced. That's not going to be the last time I say this when we're talking about this game. Remember, sports fans, leadoff walks come around to score 25 to 30% of the time. He gets the next 2 batters out, but Ceddanne Rafaela, who had 7 RBIs on Saturday, doubled to put runners at second and third, and then Jarren Duran hit a triple to put the Cubs down 4-0. That guy can fly. Now, the Cubs offense was shut out the day before for the first time this whole season, right? And in this game, they didn't have a hit until the 4th inning. With 1 out, Mike Tauchman and Ian Happ both singled, but Christopher Morel struck out and Michael Busch lined out to end the threat. In the top of the 5th, Dansby Swanson crushed one that traveled 366 feet to right, but unfortunately, Wilyer Abreu made a spectacular catch that robbed Dansby of extra bases. That ball would have been a home run in 28 out of 30 ballparks. Unfortunately, Fenway was not one of them. The Cubs finally did get to Houck in the 7th inning with 2 outs. Michael Busch got hit by a pitch, so there you go. Dansby Swanson singled, and then Matt Mervis, who had been struggling, singled down the left field line, and the Cubs were on the board 4-1. Then in the 8th, PCA and Nico hit back-to-back singles, and Mike Tauchman, the Palatine pounder, hit one out, and after being down the entire game, the Cubs had tied it up. Daniel Palencia pitched 2 strong innings. He gave up no runs with 2 strikeouts. And then came the 9th inning, and I thought it was the worst inning I've seen from Craig Counsell since he came to Chicago, right? I think Craig's a great manager. Anyone that follows the show knows how excited I am to have Craig in Chicago, but that was bad. I'd love to have been in there to ask some questions. Hopefully some of the beat writers did. I didn't get to hear any of the post game yet, but with 1 out in the 9th in a tie game, Kenley Jansen's on the mound, to close it out, their closer. Counsell, right? You know Kenley Jansen's a righty. With 1 out, Counsell pinch hit for lefty Matt Mervis. Okay, so, all right, who are you going to have pinch hit for Mervis? Nick Madrigal, a righty with no pop, who had been hitting 118 since April 6th. Why would you do that? Here's what I'm going to tell you. I know Mervis hasn't looked great, but I can 100% say that Matt Mervis had a better chance of getting a home run there than Nick Madrigal. Okay, so that makes absolutely no sense. Why would you do that? Why would you pinch hit for Matt Mervis? If it was a lefty pitcher, 100% understand it. It was a righty versus lefty matchup. And then Nick Madrigal is just not a guy, maybe leading off. I have no idea, but no, Then in the bottom of the 9th, Mark Leiter comes into the game. First thing he does, gives up a leadoff walk. Same as Yency Almonte, Jarren Duran. Like that wouldn't come back to hurt him. So you got the speedy Jarren Duran on first. Rafael Devers singles, puts runners at the corners with no outs for the red hot Tyler O'Neill. Now I'm shouting at my TV, don't throw it to him. Don't throw it to him. Just get the next batter. Who cares? Right? But instead of walking him, Leiter pitches to him. He falls behind 2-0, but he gets back into it. 2-2 count. And then O'Neill hits one 183 feet. Dansby tried to make an over-the-shoulder catch, and it popped out of his glove. My question for Counsell, why the hell was Ian Happ playing so deep? Okay, go ahead and watch the replay. He's about 15 feet from the track. All right, if Tyler O'Neill hits one that deep, Duran's tagging up and scores easily. So I don't know if someone missed a sign. I don't know who is positioning the outfielders, but to me, that was just absolutely ridiculous. You cannot do it. Cannot do it. To me, it is, I'll have to look at the numbers. I'd love an explanation from somebody, but I don't get, somebody has to explain to me why Ian Happ was playing so deep.
You're listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It is season 3. It is episode 35. The Cubs injuries, they keep coming. Don't forget to listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Maybe leave Crawly and I a 5-star review. In this segment, we interview former Cubs PR boss Bob Ibach, who's had to deal with the fallout of the infamous Lee Elia rant that occurred 41 years ago this week, captured by our friend Les Grobstein.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, I'm happy to have back Bob Ibach. He was the Cubs PR director 1982 to 1989. Bob, how you doing today?
Doing great. I'll tell you what, so far I've been very happy looking at the Cubs this season. Despite a few injuries and everything else, they're doing really well.
Well, I know, Bob, that we're celebrating 40 years of 1984, and we're going to have you back on the podcast to talk about the Big Club 400 event. But the reason I have you on is this week is going to be the 41st anniversary of a different memory. It is the 41st anniversary of the rant by Lee Elia. And, a lot of people don't realize that, Lee played baseball. He played for the South Side. He played even a little bit for the Cubs. But he was selling insurance when Dallas Green offered him a job in the farm system with the Phillies. And he was a third base coach for the Phillies when they won the World Series in 1980. So Dallas Green takes the job with the Cubs as GM in 81. He hires you. He hires Lee Elia. What was it about? What is it that Dallas, do you think, saw in Elia? Because he, to get him that job in the farm system, to have him play, to be the third base coach, and then the first coach as the Cubs, what was it about Elia that Dallas thought was really good to be?
I think Dallas saw in Lee a guy that really had a heart and a lot of energy for the job. And being that, Lee also had played, as you know, for the Cubs in a yeoman's kind of a way back in the, I guess it was the 60s, as well as the White Sox. He played a few games with them. That, and I think Lee also, many people don't know this, later on after Lee left the Cubs and he went out with Lou Piniella in Seattle, he was instrumental in the 2 rookies that they had out there to straighten out their hitting, because Lee was a really good teacher of hitting. And I'm talking about A-Rod and Griffey Jr. Both of those guys came to him because they were struggling in their rookie years, and Lee corrected that. So Lee was really good with individual players, wanting to take them aside. And also Dallas liked somebody like himself who wanted a little bit of emotion, had an edge. And Lee certainly had that edge.
Well, they started the building a new tradition was how you guys all rolled it out there when Dallas and you and Lee Elia are out there. 1982, obviously doesn't go good. They finished with a record of 73 and 89. They finished in 5th place in the NL East. And the next season didn't start much better. And I think people nowadays, Bob, when they think about Wrigley, they think about it constantly being packed and jumping and just how crazy it was. And that's not how it was in 1982, 1983.
No, I saw a few of those days, a few too many. I remember the time I was behind when Willie Stargell came in the 82 season at the very end in September. And I'll never forget, we had a Salute Willie Stargell final day, and I'm standing out there behind home plate with the microphones, and we're going to do a little talk to the people in the lower stands. And Willie looked at me, he says, Bob, he says, there's not a lot of people here today. And there was probably only maybe 4,500. And he says, well, let's get them in tight. So he automatically gets on the microphone and invites people down the left field and the right field line to come on in. We filled out everything behind home plate. It looked like a high school attendance type of thing, a rally. And he starts speaking to him. Well, that went on for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. He's done. He goes back into the Pirates dugout. I head off to the Cubs dugout, and I get the ring down phone in the dugout calling me. It's Arnie Harris. He says, Bob, you got to move those guys back to their seats because I can't use the cameras down the left field or right field lines. Everything will look like it's nobody's here. I said, Arnie, I'm not going in there and going back on the microphone and telling them they got to move back to their other seats. And I proceeded to go up to the press box. And that day, Arnie had to use only the center field camera. So I got accustomed. There were some days we had, what was the press secretary from Ronald Reagan? We had him out. And a little girl saying the sun can come out tomorrow. And I think there was only like 3,500 people there. So when we got to the beginning of the 83 season, and we got off to a pretty bad start. I remember opening day, and most people would say, "Are you sure about this?" They had, I think it was a little over 4,000 people on opening day, and the first 9 games of the homestand, there weren't any more than, I think, on one occasion, maybe when the Cardinals came in, but it was usually 3,500 to 5,000 tops on a given day. So there weren't a lot of fans there, and then of course. Elia was going through a tough time. I think we started out before the tirade. We were 4-15, and we were getting destroyed. And that game we lost that day on the 29th of April. Lee Smith, we lost 4-3. We had a 3-1 lead in that game in the 5th inning. And Lee Smith, the Wild pitched in a run in the 9th inning, and we lost that game 4-3. So that was the setup as we're all walking down the left field line going to the clubhouse. And Lee spotted, and I spotted, I think it was about 15 guys in the lower grandstands by the tarp where the pitching mound was for the bullpen. And all of a sudden, some of these guys are flinging paper cups full of beer at Moreland and Boa and Elia. Well, I thought we had to save those guys from going into the stands and beating them. So now we're walking down to the clubhouse, down the far left field line, and we're going in to do the post-game stuff. And I had to run back up to the press box at that point. But that sets the stage for a couple of the writers, and there were only 4 there at the time, if I remember. They were Bob Marcus, who wrote for the Tribune, Joel Beard, Don Frisky, who wrote for the Daily Herald, and Les Grobstein, who was working for WLS and in those days.
And I, it's funny you bring that up because it's hard to think about that the Cubs clubhouse used to be underneath the left field bleachers. So you have to literally walk past all these people. And I mean, I wouldn't be messing around with Keith Moreland. That's a bad man. I think last time we talked was Ed Lynch learned that the hard way, but
he did.
A lot of the press went to the Dodgers clubhouse because there was a kid, Mike Marshall.
Mike Marshall was there. Yeah.
Buffalo Grove, he hit a home run. Wasn't he dating a famous singer at the
I think
from
you're
the
right.
Go-Go's?
I don't know where, but he was dating somebody, a famous singer, and he had a good following, from Buffalo Grove, and so a lot of the writers went over there to get some post-game comments from him.
And so, obviously Lee's a little fired up, he's defending his players when you're talking about Boa, when you're talking about Moreland and all that stuff. And Les was working at the radio station, like you said, and he has this giant recorder. And do you remember if there was any particular question or statement that set Lee off, or was he just still fired up from
the thing I remember him, there was a reporter that asked that's something along the line, well, Lee, you're 5-14 and you've gotten off to a difficult start. Do you think the fans are still really behind you here? And that's when it began. That triggered. That was the bulb that went off. Okay, for whatever reason, now Lee's probably thinking about the guys throwing beer cups and full of beer at his players. He's thinking about the criticism that he's heard. Say Ron Cey was hitting only 171 in April, though he went on to have a pretty good season, 24 homers, and I think 90 RBIs. The Penguin wasn't doing much, and we just had gotten him from the Dodgers, and there was a lot of hope surrounding a guy like Ronnie Cey. And the team itself was losing ball games in odd ways, like we did that day when Smith Wild pitched in the winning run. And I think he's also thinking about the sparsity of crowds that were coming out. Like I said, most of our crowds were 3,000-4,000 a game. So he's thinking about the nickel and dime guys that he started to talk about. Now he's got the emotions going, and it just went off.
We're mired now in a little difficulty. We got all these so-called fans that come out here and say they're Cub fans that are supposed to be behind you, ripping every thing you do. I'll tell you one thing. I hope we get hotter than just to stuff it up them 3,000 people that show up every day. Because if they're the real Chicago fans, they can kiss my right downtown and print it. My what the am I supposed to do? Go out there and let my players get destroyed every day and be quiet about it? For the nickel-dime people that show up? The don't even work. That's why they're out of the game. They want to go out and get a job and find out what it's like to go out there and live. 85% of the world's working. The other 15 come out here. The playground for the rip them cutting like the players. Got guys busting their ass, and them people do. And that's the Cubs? My the great support that the players get around here. I haven't seen it this year. Don't ask me about any specific play. I won't answer it. I'm not going to talk about specific plays. The name of the game is hit the ball, catch the ball, and get the job done. Every time we lose a close game, it's magnified. Why did this guy bunt it and that guy pop up or this guy throw a wild pitch? That's baseball, fellas. That's going to happen. That's how runs are scored. That's how the balance goes cockeyed. That's the difference between victory and defeat. Right now, we have more losses than we have wins. Everybody associated with this organization have been winners their whole life. Everybody. And the credit is not given in that respect. The changes that have happened in the Cub organization are multifold. All right, they don't show because we're 5-14. And unfortunately, that's the criteria of them dumb 15% to come out to date baseball. The other 85% are earning a living. I'll tell you, it'll take more than a 5-13 or 5-14 to destroy the makeup of this club. I'll guarantee you that. There's some pros out there that want to play this game. But you're in a stigma of the Dodgers and the Phillies and the Cardinals and all that cheap. All these mother editorials about Say and the Phillyitis and all that shit. It's sickening. It's unbelievable. It really is. It's a disheartening situation we're in right now. Anybody that was associated with the Cub organization 4 or 5 years ago that came back and sees the multitude of progress that's been made will understand that if they're baseball people, then 5-14 doesn't negate all that work. Got 143 games left. What I'm trying to say is don't rip them guys out there. Rip me. If you want to rip somebody, rip my ass. But don't rip them guys, because they're giving everything they can give. And right now they're trying to do more than God gave them, and that's why we make the simple mistakes. That's exactly why. But once we hit that groove, it'll flow. And it will flow. The talent's there. I don't know how to make it any clearer to you. I'm frustrated. I'll guarantee you I'm frustrated. It'd be different if I walked in this room every day at 8:30 and saw a bunch of guys that didn't give it. They give it.
So after that rant, Les runs to the press box, and apparently he played the tape for the broadcasters, Harry Caray, Lou Boudreau, and Vince Lloyd. And if you could stun those three guys, you know you got some radio gold there, right?
I had been up in the press box by that time, and he's coming in with this tape, and he said to me, "Bob, you're not going to believe how much Lee went off on this." So now he's playing it back, and Harry's listening to it, and of course he's amused. Boudreau just sat there and thought, "Oh, wow, he's gone." And Vince always had that cigar in his mouth. And when things got a little bit wild, that cigar would light up and you'd see the end of it, and it was burning. and they were starting to talk about, well, I don't think he may be back here tomorrow. And that's when Les said to me, he said, "Listen, Bob, you've been good to me. I'm going to give you the tape. I want you to bring it into Dallas because this could get out of hand." So he handed me the tape, and he said, "Now I want it back because, this is not yours to keep or bury, I brought it down to Dallas's office, and I knocked on the door. I said, Dallas, we got to talk. Lee had quite a tirade in the locker room. I've got the tape recorder here. You need to listen to this. So just me and Dallas sitting in the room. And, you know, Dallas could look like John Wayne at times. Now, he's sitting there and he's putting his, as he's listening to this, I can see him, his hands are going through his hair and he's getting red in the face. And I'm sitting there listening to it. He finally, when it ends, he looks over at me. He hits the desk. Ibach, what are we going to do with your media? I'm thinking, oh, it's my media. Now, meanwhile, Debbie Waterman, who was my secretary, she's coming in, peeking in the door saying, Bob, I've got all these people from other TV stations and members of the media who weren't out there that day. They're headed down to Wrigley Field. So Dallas says to me, he says, you know, we got to get Lee up here. So in those days, you know, you didn't have cell phones. So we call down to the manager's office. Lee picks it up. He's calm by now. And Dallas says, Lee, I need you up here ASAP. Well, Elia then goes ahead and tells him his daughter, Tanya, had invited him out to be a celebrity umpire out in, I think it was Mount Prospect or Prospect Heights. And he was headed into his car, but he had left his keys at his desk and had come back in. And that's the only way he would have answered the phone. He would have been gone down, probably down Irving Park by then, headed out to the I-90 and would have never received that call. And Lee said, can you wait? I've got to do this thing for my daughter. And Dallas said, no, Lee, I need you up here right away. And then Lee asked again, and Dallas said, listen, Lee, if you don't get up here right now, clean out your locker because you're not coming back tomorrow. So, of course, Lee came right up to the room. And when he came in, Dallas says, turn it on for him. So I turned on the tape recorder, and Lee sat there. Well, the man's face got ghost white within a minute. He didn't realize how emotional I think he had gotten and how the profanities came out and everything else. And when I clicked it off, he just looked down at the ground like a little schoolboy just got scolded. And Dallas looked over at me. He says, you got any ideas? And I said, you know, I think obviously we have a crisis here. And Lee, I'm going to suggest, but it's up to you. I'm going to try to get a hold of Jack Brickhouse. He does a 6:15 show on WGN. And if you're willing to go on there and apologize in whatever you want to say for the outburst, I think that would help a little bit and soften some things, only because when the reporters come in here, and there's a slew of them coming in here, you can expect about 40 to be here any minute. They're going to ask you hard questions. And at least you can say, you know what? I realized I got too emotional. I've already called WGN. I've been on the air with Jack Brickhouse, and I've apologized to Chicago for my behavior. They will have to include that in any report that they do. And I think, looking back, that probably saved his job that night.
Yeah, and you know, the thing about it is that we all kind of laugh a little bit about the tirade, and I think 46 F-bombs and a couple other colorful words in there. But when I listen to it, and you listen to it carefully, he cares so much about his players. I mean, it comes out in there, and he keeps saying, look, blame me, don't blame the players. You know, he was upset about, like you said, the criticism in the press about the Dodgers guys, the Phillies guys on the team, and say getting out to a slow start. And you know, I think that's kind of something that gets lost when you hear the tirade, is the fact that he was really just trying to go to bat for his players.
That's what a good manager does. All the criticism should be deferred to them. And good managers do that. They take the blame. And Lee was one of those guys. I mean, he was a stand-up guy. And his heart, he loved the Chicago Cubs because he had played with them back in the 60s. And people, you know, him criticizing the fans, I don't think he thought really what he was saying, because he told me later on when we came back to Harry Caray's restaurant years later, and we did another tape that he did, and this was a more positive message, and we put it in a little display box. and because he had a bout with prostate cancer, and we raised money for that when people bought the talking baseball. Okay. And Lee told me that night we went to a Cubs game, although the Cubs did not ever offer us any free tickets. There's a gentleman, the pink hat guy behind home plate, Jim Annixter, who gave up 2 of his box seats right there in the front row. And Lee and I sat there that night and watched the Cubs game. Then we went back to the hotel and we went down to have a couple of brews. And it was around 10 o'clock. And of course, the news is coming on. And one of the stations had a poll because they had gone out to film the activities earlier in the day over at Harry Caray's restaurant with Lee back in town. And they said, do you think that Chicago has forgiven Lee Elia? And Lee, I could just see him. He's sitting there looking at me and he grabbed his forehead. He says, oh no, here it comes. And he really worried that the fans never forgave him. That really bothered him all those years later. So at the end of the evening, the poll comes back, the results at about 10:25 at the end of the sportscast. And they said, well, the poll results are in for Lee Elia. And here's what they are. I think it was 87% of the fans forgive Lee Elia. And I still get a little emotional when I think of that moment because Lee looked over and started to cry. And he says, oh my God, Bob. I'm so happy to hear that because I never wanted to offend these people. I love Chicago. I love the Chicago Cubs. And he says, I would never do anything to hurt people. I just got too emotional that day. And I took off and I went on a rant that I don't even to this day remember everything I said unless you play back that tape. And sometimes I listen to that tape and he says, I played it back for my wife, Penny, one time. And I said, I don't believe that was me. So, it really hurt him. And I know years later, he came back. He was working with Lou Piniella with the Tampa Bay Devil Rays in those days. He was their assistant coach. And he was there the night that Sammy Sosa broke the bat and the cork came out. And Piniella said, Lee, you go out to home plate and talk to the umpire. And he looked over and he told me later on, he says, oh, that's just great. Lee Elia's going over to home plate to challenge the cork coming out of the bat. And if I haven't had enough problems in this ballpark over the years, here I am going out to home plate.
Well, it's interesting because of just how that changed the trajectory of a lot of different things. Les Grobstein, the Grobber, I mean, he became beloved in Chicago for 670 the score. He did overnights. And, when Les passed away, they auctioned off the recorder and I think it got $2,000. And 2 of the guys that were really interested in buying it were Paul Konerko and AJ Pierzynski.
Yeah.
That became a big deal in the White Sox clubhouse. But when asked about it, those guys said, you know what? Players sometimes have to just bottle their emotions and maybe you just had an awful day, just an awful game. And guys are shoving microphones in your faces and asking questions that they got to ask. But, it was just kind of a fun thing that someone finally got to speak their mind. And I wonder if Lee realizes how much that still resonates with baseball players today, that rant.
Yeah, I think he understands that. But you mentioned Les Grobstein. I have to say this. For years, Les would call me, and I always knew he called me on the 27th or 28th of April and said, Bob, because he was doing overnights. He says, will you come back on as a guest? And I think for about 10 years in a row, I would come on at midnight and we would talk for half an hour to 40 minutes about that day. And when he passed away and I didn't get that call that year, it just kind of broke me up because, when you work with the media, guys like Fred Mitchell and Joe Goddard, and guys like that, they become buddies because they travel with you all the time. And I always tried to remember to be fair with the media because I was a member of the media myself, and I covered the Orioles for almost 10 years back in the 70s. And I remember Dallas telling me when he called me up to ask me to come to Chicago to be the PR director of the Cubs. I'll never forget. And I said, Dallas, I do broadcasting. I'm a reporter. I cover the baseball beat. I don't know PR. The only thing I know about PR is when, PR guy would come in to bring us out for dinner and have some steaks. I said, I mean, I don't want to do that no. He says, no. He says, remember how you wanted to be treated as a reporter. And he says, just turn the tables around and you treat the media that way. And that was the best piece of advice he ever gave me. And I always made sure, because I had a broadcasting background and I had a reporting background with the written word, when I came up to the press box in the very beginning, all the front row seats were reserved for the written media, the newspaper guys. And everybody on the broadcast side got pushed to the back. Well, Tom Scher was there and a few of the others. And I said, and it caused a little commotion with a couple people, we're going to put down nameplates. And the main beat writers, like the Tribune and Sun-Times and Daily Herald, were going to get front row seats. But I said, there's a portion of the front row seats that are going to be reserved for the top radio stations in town. They deserve equality. And many years later, people, especially in the broadcast media, thanked me for standing up for that, because to this day, I believe that still holds true, that many of the top members of the broadcast media are more up toward the front.
Well, I mean, it's good that you were able to stick up for, again, for all those people, and Les was somebody that, he's just one of a kind. I don't think we're ever going to see another Les.
Grobber was a different guy. Yeah.
And it was always fun calling him. And it's just weird how all of these everything kind of twists together when you look at the people that were involved, like yourself and Lee and Les, and just, it's so amazing to think about. And now bars like Nisei Lounge have Lee Elia Day every year, and they celebrate. And that rant is still to this day something that people remember. And again, I think people love Lee Elia for that, because he showed heart and he showed fire. And I think sometimes that's what Chicago fans enjoy. Well,
I agree with you. And Lee and I have had a couple lunches together in recent years, and we've talked about things like that. And he's mellowed a little bit over the years, but he's still got some fire in him. I mean, he's in his middle 80s now, and he worked for a long time as a consultant with different ball clubs. In fact, with the Rays for a while. My son's team, my son Kevin's now the assistant general manager with the Tampa Bay Rays. And I visited with Lee down he lives in Tampa. But I think the fact that he learned that night, when we came back after the thing at Harry Caray's that we did, and that he found out on that poll on TV that 87% of Chicago forgave him, that put his heart at rest.
A little bit of closure.
Yeah, that's the word he used. He says, Bob, this gives me some closure. But he was sure. He was almost sure that he didn't want to hear the results of the poll. And I said, Lee, I think it's going to have a happy ending. And when it did, I looked over, and the tears were coming right out of his cheeks. I mean, out of his eyes. It was so emotional. It's a scene I'll never, ever forget. And it made me feel good that what we did coming back, not only did we raise money for prostate cancer, but it gave Lee some closure on that incident.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for giving me some of your time and giving us these memories of Lee Elia Day so many years ago. And I'm looking forward to having you on again to discuss the big 40th anniversary party at Club 400 with the 1984 team. And I guarantee you it's going to be one hell of a party. Print it.
Oh, and print that. And I've had a lot of pleasure in calling up some of the guys. Warren Brewster, who lives on the West Coast. I had a 45-minute talk with Richie Hebner the other day. And you know what Richie does for a living these days?
What's he do now?
Well, his father ran a
morgue.
A morgue,
yeah.
Right. And he used to be a gravedigger in the off season. Now he told me, he says, I get up every day at 8:00 and I work until 2. I said, what are you doing? He says, I drive a hearse. And he says, I handle funerals. And I always have somebody in the back that I can talk to that won't talk back to me. And he says, I can get on phone calls during the day. I can talk all I want. I'm at peace. But Rich is going to come back. And if anybody can go ahead and entertain anybody, Hacker can certainly do that.
Well, it's going to be quite the party, and we look forward to having you back on.
Okay.
This is the Fly the W670 podcast. It is episode 35 of season 3. the Cubs injuries keep on coming. Crawly, let's talk about some roster moves and the injury report that we talked about earlier in segment 1.
Yeah, if we take a look right now on Sunday when we are recording, it is still a half a game distance between the Cubs and the Brewers. The Brewers are at 17-9, the Cubs 17-10. Cincinnati is at 15-12, 2.5 games back. Pittsburgh 14-14, 4 games back. And then the Cardinals are 1 game under 500, still in the basement, but starting to make a little noise.
All right. Let's hope that we can continue to say little. All right. So that's the standings. Again, we've got the Sunday action to come. We'll update this again for you when we talk about the after they go out to New York and take on the Mets. All right. So we've got some injury news to talk about, starting with Jordan Wicks, right?
Yeah, to add insult to injury to that blowout on Saturday, we've also found out after the game that Jordan Wicks would not be starting on Sunday. He has left forearm tightness. Wicks had his best start of the season against the Astros on Tuesday. Dustin, a forearm injury to a pitcher's throwing arm is something that always makes you nervous. It is not good. Once again, let's hope that the baseball gods are looking on us. Hayden Wesneski will take the start today.
Right, especially the fact that you didn't see this coming. It's still early in the year. It shouldn't be like a tired arm or a dead arm or anything like that at this point. So this is something to be worried about. The good news is, though, we talked about depth a little bit earlier, is Hayden Wesneski has looked pretty good. I just don't know how long he can go, right?
Right, and that's why you used the position players yesterday in the blowout. If they knew something,
yep.
Don't waste bullpen arms because you might need them today.
Right.
Luke Little was optioned to AAA, and then Daniel Palencia was recalled, as was left-handed pitcher Richard Lovelady, a.k.a. Dick Lovelady. In one of those crazy moves, Dustin, Garrett Cooper, who was DFA'd by the Cubs on Tuesday, was traded to the Red Sox for cash considerations. Remember, we talked about Red Sox first baseman Tristan Casas has a rib injury. So this deal works out for Boston. It's just going to be odd if Cooper's starting today on Sunday. I'm scared he's going to go off on the Cubs.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, we'll see about that.
Now, hard to believe, but the Cubs did get some good injury news. Justin Steele threw 47 pitches in an extended spring training game on April 26th, and he had no issues. Friend of the pod, Rich Biesterfeld, you could check his workout at Beast22, but he had some great picks of the session. Craig Counsell told reporters that he will start on May 1st for AAA Iowa, and then we'll see what happens depending on that. But you got to imagine, Dustin, I think 2 starts would probably do it.
Yeah, probably 2. Yep. So you could see him maybe the second week of May making a start back up at the big league levels. That would be awesome, especially with the other recent injury news to the starting staff. We just talked about Jordan Wicks maybe missing a start or 2 or 3. Let's hope not. All right. So after they wrap up with the Red Sox, the Cubs will be in New York taking on the Mets Monday night.
Yeah, the Mets had a disastrous 2023 season. They went all in. They extended closer Edwin Diaz, signed Justin Verlander. They signed former Cubs reliever David Robertson. Kodai Senga was their big offseason signing from the Mets. But Dustin, the Mets were cursed that season, started in the WBC when closer Edwin Diaz got injured, out for the season. And then because of injuries and poor performance, the Mets became sellers at the deadline, trading Robertson, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander. They traded Mark Canha to the Brewers, which helped the Brewers a lot. But the Mets finished 2023 with a record of 75-87, good for 4th in the NL East with a whopping payroll of $330 million. I guess it doesn't go as far as it used to, Dustin.
Yeah.
Manager Buck Showalter, who was the manager of the year in 22, was fired, and GM Billy Epler was fired and banned from MLB for 1 year for faking injuries. Look out, Carter Hawkins, Hendricks. But the Cubs and Mets played 6 times last season. They split the series 3-3, with each team taking 2 of 3 in home. The Cubs taking 2 of 3 from the Mets at Wrigley in May and losing 2 of 3 at Shea in August.
Now, that wasn't exactly how you wanted to, those August games. The Cubs, that was, again, when the Cubs were so close, right, to getting to the postseason last year, those were a couple of games you'd like to have had back.
One of them was a blown save by Alzolay, who hadn't blown one in a long time, and that was not long after that. That's when he went on the IL.
Mm-hmm.
The Mets offseason wasn't much better. They tried hard to get Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They didn't do that. They tried to extend Pete Alonso. Didn't do that. They did get JD Martinez at the last minute. He was one of those Boris clients that signed late. They also added starting pitchers Sean Manaea and Luis Severino, both who the Cubs are going to see. But when you talk about key losses, losing Verlander, Scherzer, and Tommy Pham.
Tommy Pham of White Sox fame now. He's a White Sox.
Turning it around for the Southsiders, right?
All he had to do was walk into that clubhouse and everybody got their stuff together.
Now, in the offseason, the Mets signed David Stern as their new president of baseball ops from the Brewers, and it looked like they might get Craig Counsell before the Cubs snatched him, but the Mets hired Carlos Mendoza, former Yankees bench coach, as their new skipper. They're currently 13-13 and are 5-5 in their last 10. They are finishing up a series with the Cardinals and are trying to avoid getting swept as they lost the first two games, 4-2 and 7-4. I like the fact that they're losing. I just don't like the fact they're losing to the Cardinals.
Right. Exactly right. All right. So we've got some pitching probables, and game one, Monday night, Jameson Taillon taking the hill for his third start, right?
Yeah. Jameson Taillon looking good so far, 2-0 with a 1.69 ERA. Looking good. He's had two starts, one against Houston, one against Miami. And he's been able to go, he went 5 innings in the first start, 5.2 innings the last start. He's only given 1 run in each of those. So, boy, if you could, this is what we talked about earlier. If you can get a Jameson Taillon comeback season, last season he was disappointed, but the second half, Dustin, was pretty good. If he can be that pitcher he was in the second half, that gives us a lot more than I think people expected. We talked. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, he's looked good so far. This is another, these are step by step, right? It's step by step by step. We're going to see how good he can be. And they need him right now. They need him to be that second half guy.
The Cubs are going up against right-hander Luis Severino. In his last 3 games, he's 2-1. Last start against San Francisco, he didn't do bad. He went 6 innings, gave up 3 runs on 5 hits. But the Mets offense is what's really been kind of hurting him this year. So Severino has been pitching, again, pretty well. He's given up 3 runs in 2 starts, but in the other 3 starts, he's only given up 1 run, and he shut out the Pittsburgh Pirates. So, let's see what happens in that one. In game 2, we have for the Cubs, Javier Assad, who has just been, to me, he's picking up from where he is last season, and nobody's talking about this kid.
I was just going to say, I mean, he is like the redheaded stepchild from the standpoint of he does not get as much pub as I think he deserves. He doesn't get enough acclaim. He has been awfully good. I hope all this talk that you and I are doing doesn't spoil it, but he's someone that should be getting a lot more credit than he's gotten so far.
Right. He's had 5 starts. He's 2-0 with a 2 ERA. He struck out 26 in 27 innings pitched. If you take a look against Seattle on 4/14, he went 5.2 innings, gave up 2 earned runs. Against Miami, he went 4.2 and gave up 1 earned run. And against Houston, he went 5.2 innings and gave up only 1 earned run. So this is a guy that he just goes out, he takes the ball, and I love his bulldog mentality. That's something you've always noticed, and hoping that he can continue it against the Mets.
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Now he's going up against left-handed pitcher Sean Manaea. As far as Manaea is concerned, he was somebody that looked really good for Oakland and then kind of struggled when he went to San Diego and San Francisco. He's been all right, but just never has really kind of fulfilled that promise. He has made 5 starts this season, and he is 1-1 for the Mets with a 3.33 ERA, 27 strikeouts, and 24.1 innings pitched. In his start against the Dodgers, he went 5 innings, gave up only 2 runs on 4 hits. Against the Giants, he went 4.2 innings, and he gave up 0 runs on 4 hits. But the one thing I'll tell you about Manaea, Dustin, is that he is not going deep into games. So hopefully the Cubs can take advantage of that.
And Manaea was a guy that the Cubs were looking for a year or 2 ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people were looking for him, and I think people still see a lot in him, but he hasn't been what they thought he was when he was with Oakland.
All right, this is one of your favorite, a 4-gamer, Crawly. So we've got game 3, Shota Imanaga.
Yep, Shota Imanaga. We talked about all the records. ERA under 1 with 5 starts, and he is 4-0. He has 28 strikeouts and 27 innings pitched. This guy has just been absolutely amazing. Against Miami, he went 6 innings, gave up 2 earned runs on 5 hits. Against Boston, he went 6.1 inning, and gave up 1 earned run on 5 hits. So, I mean, there's no doubt that right now Imanaga is the ace and the starter and the stopper. And so, you're just hoping that, you really want obviously a 1-2 punch. So when Justin Steele comes back, when you got Justin Steele and you got Shota Imanaga, that's going to be fun.
That'll be a nice 1-2 punch. And then what do they got for the Mets? Who are the Cubs facing in the third game?
They are facing right-hander Jose Butto. He's been with the Mets for a couple of years. He started 7 games last year and was 1-4. But this year, he's looking a lot better. He's 0-1 in 4 games started, which, okay, no big deal. But he's got a 2.88 ERA. He's got 25 strikeouts in 22 innings pitched. So he's a youngster that's really kind of, he's only 26 years old. But this has really been a good season for him. Against 3 starts ago against a very good Royals team, he went 6 innings, gave up no earned runs and 2 hits. Against the Dodgers, we know the Dodgers, he went 4.1 innings. He gave up 2 runs on 3 hits, but he did have 5 walks to go along with 6 Ks. And he did lose against the Cardinals. It was one of his worst starts of the season. He went 5.2 innings, gave up 4 earned runs on 4 hits with 3 walks and 4 strikeouts. Dustin, we talk about it with the Cubs, again, with a guy like this who really, this is probably going to be his first full season starting. You're talking about a guy that can definitely walk some batters. So just that patient Cubs hitting approach is what you're going to want to do.
All right, game number 4. We've got the everybody's favorite TBD for the Cubs at this moment because of the injury bug with the Cubs. It could be Ben Brown at this point. Maybe we'll have to wait and see. Right? Is that who you'd maybe think it would be?
If you're asking me, I'm thinking they're going to go with Ben Brown. I mean, obviously, you're going to. I mean,
you got to give him another chance, right? Plus, they've got injury issues.
You're right. You got to give him another chance. You know that Steele's not going to be ready.
No.
So. I would honestly just say on this one that again, with a young guy, you're going to have days that just don't happen. And again, it's not like he gave up a ton of runs on that last start against Boston. It was just a matter of he didn't go deep and he gave up a lot of hits and in a short amount of time. What I liked about the last start is still no walks. So that's the key really for Ben Brown. He only went 3.2 innings pitched, gave up 3 earned runs in 3.2 innings. But before that, in some of the starts, and understand too, Dustin, that, he's only started 3 games. So the last time he pitched was against Houston. He only went 1 inning. And the time before that against Miami, he went 2 innings. So it's kind of like, I would just, it's hard, but I would just prefer to let the kids start and really start to get a rhythm going.
Yeah, totally agree. Let him get a rhythm. Yeah. I mean, I'd be really disappointed if he wasn't out there. That would be really disappointing for,
I don't know who else it could possibly be. So
unless they did some kind of crazy bullpen type day, but I don't know that they're in a position to do that. And agree, it's a yuck. Why wouldn't you? I mean, again, let Ben Brown start, and if he can't go, you give him an early hook before he gets through the lineup the third time. All right, quickly, Crawly, what do we got with the Mets? And then I got to make a prediction.
Adrian Hauser's going. He is 0-3 with an 8.37 ERA. So the Cubs should be able to take advantage of this. He has struggled against good hitters. Against the Dodgers on 421. He gave up 8 runs in 4 innings. And in his against St. Louis, he gave up 6 earned runs on 9 hits in 4.1 innings. So this is a guy that the Cubs can definitely get at.
All right, beautiful. All right, Crawly, favorite type of series 4. I'm going to say a split. I'm going to say 2-2. We don't know TBD. I like the Cubs to win the 2 games in the middle with Assad and with Shota Imanaga.
I will once again say I'm going to go Cubs are going to take 3 of 4. How about that?
All right, good. You be the positive one this time.
I feel that Hauser's not that great. I like Shota against Butto. That's a good matchup. And then Assad and Taillon both look good. So I think there's 3 wins in here. And the Cardinals or the Dodgers are reeling. They've lost 2 in a row. They might get swept by the Cardinals. So I'm going with the Cubs taking 3 out of 4.
All right, well, that's a wrap. Don't forget to download. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to follow us on all the socials. We're on every single one of those platforms out there for you. And don't forget to leave Crawly and I one of those 5-star reviews. We'll be back after the Mets series to review the next series. And hopefully we'll be talking about a lot of flying W's. Crawly, have a great rest of your weekend, and you and I will get back together soon.
Absolutely. And remember, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!